Welcome to Blue Monday from the Blue Room. We're back on a Monday and we're back, sadly, after another Everton defeat. I am joined by Dave and Rodger to pick through the Man City game of the weekend. If you're watching on YouTube, please do subscribe and give us a like. And if you're listening on a podcast, leave us a comment if you want. Give us a 5-star rating if you think we're worth it. And just tell all your mates about it if you like what you listen to. Anyway, right, let's get into the game. Disappointing to lose against Man City, I thought, and I think we said this in post-match. It was nice to see us go sort of maybe toe-to-toe with them a bit. We didn't sit back and look scared of them. They did a lot of passing of the ball, which they do, which we've spoken about, Rodger, in previous episodes. They're really good at passing. They're really good at movement, but they do just sort of wear you down. It feels a bit like death by 1,000 cuts watching City play against Everton at the weekend. What were your takeaways from the first, Rodger?
I was thinking about this just before, and it reminded me of one of those Olympic finals where there's like a 5,000 or a 10,000 meter, and there's a plucky Brit at the front, and then with 2 laps to go, the quality Ethiopian just runs away from everyone, and like for 9,000 meters of the race, we looked like we were in it, and the last 1,000 meters they just ran away from us. The minute they scored one, that was the end of the game. They are a terrible watch. We've talked about that, and I don't think people need to listen to that anymore because I wouldn't pay to watch them. They're not entertaining, not exciting. They don't beat a man until they bring Daku on. And we just had nothing really, did we? A bit unlucky. What was our goal threat from a set piece? Big Taco gets his slab head on it and it hits the post. And could Branthwaite have done better with the sort of headed assist that he could have, but he just heads straight the keeper? It's all right. Of course, there's no jeopardy. Of course, we're safe, and those are all the positives. But Moyes has raised the bar, hasn't he? He's raised the bar, and that's good because it couldn't have been any lower than it was in the death throes of the Dyche era. But we did well against Liverpool, and we're unlucky to lose. I know you'll say we were unlucky to lose against City, but there was an inevitability to it that I just don't like. I'd like to think that, that's a classic way for us to lose to City, to compete for however long, 75 minutes, and then just kind of give in the last 15 because we had nothing left because they sprinted away from us. And that's sad. And it's a curse, a blessing and a curse, really, Moyes raising the bar because now we might not accept just constantly losing to these top 6, top 8 teams. We've got to try and beat them once in a while. Yeah. And this City team is a shadow of its former self, and with a little bit more energy in midfield, a little bit more creativity, a little bit more pace, we could have got at them because they're vulnerable. Yeah,
it's a good point that from Rodger, isn't it, Dave? It did feel very much like a classic Everton defeat to that sort of team. They've actually beaten us every time now at Goodison since we beat them 4-0. So we've lost every game against them since that one. But yeah, it did feel like it. And I think for me, towards the end, it felt more like it was going to finish 3-0 than anything. I thought it was one of those games where you sort of get sucker punched 3 times. And you're like, okay, how did that happen? But it's hard to feel too down, but it's quite frustrating at the same time, do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think when you've got a game like that, I think it becomes evident what you do lack against sides like this. When you can be patient, you have to be patient. You're playing in your own third for the majority of the game. You've got your opposition playing in front of you. What have you got to counter-attack? What have you got to give them that sucker punch? So then they have to do something different, and then Everton can perhaps go and score the second goal. I still think that's something that we lack. It's something that we probably have to go and do this summer. I feel as if that's as poised as you're going to see Manchester City. Obviously, this season says it all. And it'll be interesting to see what they go and do this summer with Guardiola. They're at another point where they need to change things up massively. And I think you saying going toe-to-toe against them, I don't think that was any sort of bad thing, as much as we criticised what City are like to play against, because you're going to have to do this against sides like that. You compare them to Liverpool and to another extent Arsenal. You've got 3 sides there who play completely different football, yet we've gone toe-to-toe with each of them. We haven't, it sounds like we're a mini football club here, but to say that we competed against them but didn't really get any victories, that sounds a little bit more pathetic than what it actually is. I feel as if Moyes has turned the corner with that in regards to how we played against him when he was first with us. because it did feel like plucky little Everton back then. This doesn't feel the same right now. I felt as if that we were relatively comfortable for most of it. Basically had 10 men because the striker we had was absolutely woeful and doesn't move. And I don't know whether it's just that stage of the season where, you know, you're just sort of thinking, well, you've got half a dozen games left. Let's see what he's like.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a bonus. You've saved money not going to buy a striker and you can get him back on loan. Doesn't look like it for me. And yeah, I mean, I feel that the performances of most was, you know, 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10. Not much different. And I think we were all but guaranteed, and I was with the Rice smile sort of celebrating because Ipswich have confirmed that we're not in a relegation fight anymore by getting beat by Arsenal. But it felt like that very end of season game, doesn't it? And I reiterate that because it's Goodison coming towards its close. I think that's the one thing that's preventing us all falling asleep watching our football club at the moment.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on Moyes then. I mean, obviously the striker position is a big issue, and we'll come on to that later on. Obviously, because as soon as he came on and Tarkowski went off, there looked to be sort of panic stations, and you know there were a lot of other options Moyes could have turned to there as well. But I think a big one for me was bringing Garner off. I'm not sure why he did. I know Garner was on a yellow card, but it wouldn't be the first time he's seen out a game on a yellow card. He got booked on about the 60th minute. I thought that was a pivotal substitution because City scored soon after that, and I think taking Garner off for a Rubenham, he's not the same sort of player. James Garner for a Rubenham is the swap to make. I just don't think we can function without Garner. What did you make of it, Rog?
Yeah, I've seen Garner getting a bit of stick in the last week or two online. I think he's been all right, but only all right. You know, he's not pulling up any trees. I think he's just going to be a squad central midfielder. And a Rubenham, you know, he's had an in and out season. Started off all right, got injured, comes back in, plays 20 minutes, whatever. He's I don't really know that he's someone who can come on and influence the game. Like, you know, look at Kovacic. Kovacic comes off the bench, drives them forward, passes the ball forward, scores a goal. He's a great player. Really, really good signing. And that's what Pep is very good at, spotting those kind of players that are kind of, you know, at another club and a little bit, you know, just a cog in the machine. And he takes them and makes them, plugs them into his. And the whole tempo of the game changes when you bring on a player who'll drive the team forward like that.
Yeah.
And whether it's Garner, whether it's a Rubenham, I don't think we have anyone in the centre of midfield who does drive us forward. Idrissa tries, but he invariably loses the ball when he tries to run forward with it, doesn't he? And he's better at, you know, putting out fires. It's a funny sub. I mean, the calamitous one for me is obviously Keane, and that's been well spoken of. You know, he comes on, he gets booked a minute later, and then just can't defend. I mean, the first error, I can't believe it. You watch it back, he loses the sort of header to Marmoush. Marmoush kind of shoves him in the back. But then he literally stands on the edge of the penalty area with his hands on his hips, watching it happen, watching this calamity unfold. He's about 6 strides away from getting back into position. They didn't score from that one, but you come on cold as well. You're not played for 3 months or whatever. Surely it should have been O'Brien across and bring Seamus or Ashley Young or Patterson in at right back. I think that was the error, and that's probably when Pep sensed the opportunity. So Garner, a bit unlucky, but I'm not sure it made the difference that Keane did.
Yeah, I think on Michael Keane, Dave, I think we both said in our who should we get rid of, maybe we should keep him on as sort of cover. Nothing else, not for a first team slot, but as cover. I've reassessed that now, I think, because he's not. I thought he might be able to do. Remember, like Jagielka. I know he's nowhere near the level of Jagielka, but when Jagielka just came in occasionally, did a job for a game, and then we didn't see him for like 3 weeks or something like that. I thought maybe he could be that sort of centre back. You know, if we sign him up again for another year or so, just drop him in as and when needed to cover injuries. But I just don't think he's that sort of player, is he?
No, I've been getting ripped apart. I've had people messaging me saying, what on earth were you talking about when you said you keep Michael Keane for the next few years so you can save money on
the same, so
yeah. I mean, he was dreadful, wasn't he? I mean, what sort of defence you come to, and what sort of defence do I have to say that was not a ridiculous comment that I made? Like you say there, he's barely had a kick of the ball. And you're right. I think that he had an opportunity there, Moyes, to put O'Brien into the centre back slot there. As much as has been a bit of a debate about Tarkowski this season, and going through his hard man act now and again, I think I would like to have seen O'Brien next to Branthwaite, and perhaps that hasn't been done because we don't know whether Branthwaite's going to be here next season. I think the indication is that he won't. I think I would be shocked if he starts at Bramley-Moore come August. But I would like to have seen what probably we could have all looked at and thought, you know what, that's it. That's mouth-watering to see O'Brien next to Branthwaite, but it's not going to happen when it comes to when it matters. And yeah, I completely agree with Rodger there. You put on any right back in that situation. Okay, they're up against Daku. He's one of my favourite players when I've seen him this season. I think he's just he's electrifying when he comes on. Just offers something completely different. You don't know which direction he's going to go in. Yeah, him up against Seamus or him up against Ashley Young makes you want to look away a little bit, doesn't it? When you think about what could be happening there, which feels a little bit inevitable. But I mean, Keane quite clearly is not the answer, and for many, if not all, fans apart from me, want his contract over. Well, not in the summer, but now after what he did when he came on the pitch. And I suppose these things happening at this stage. Dare to say, the light at the end of the tunnel is what you've actually going to go and work on in the summer. These players that we've got to go and get. I've mentioned Brozovic there. We've got Beto, who's done fine and had a massive contribution in getting us the points we needed to stay in the league or to certainly get a comfortable amount. But they're not long-term answers, are they? Chimiti remains to be seen. Irabunum there, like Rodger mentioned too. I feel as if you've got a player there that he's going to take time. Have Everton got time? Maybe in the last 4 or 5 games, you perhaps have got a bit of time there, but I don't think we've got a manager that wants to sort of meander into the end of this season. So he's going to be someone that really needs to step up going into the new season. And I think what we're starting to see now, particularly at Goodison, because that's where the barometer is at the moment, isn't it? Because if you're not playing well at Goodison, given the countdown to when it's our last game, then I'm thinking, well, where do you expect them to go any better, given an atmosphere, given how everybody's so up for these games and want to see Everton perform at the best and win their last couple of games at Goodison? If you're not stepping up for that, I'm wondering when are you going to step up and be a starter in the 11? And yeah, Irabunum, injuries, all that sort of thing. He's not a starter. He's not a starting midfield player. So that's another area to look at as well. And I think just in general, when you play in Manchester City like we did, largely comfortable, but it does feel there's an inevitability at some point, doesn't it? If they don't, they're bound to do that at some point, or they're bound to get that move, they're bound to get that chance. We're not the club that does that, and I think we proved that apart from that chance, which I think Branthwaite should probably score.
Yes.
Yeah, he probably should. I think just going on that then to the sort of wider issue of the fact that we can't really score goals, and it's been a problem apart from that little, like you say, that little purple patch Beto had. So we've
just before Les, just before on the defensive side, what does Leighton Baines do? I mean, why didn't Leighton Baines
keep up or something?
I mean, he's cool and he's a legend and all of those lovely things, but he's meant to be the assistant manager. And surely he should have said, David, I really wouldn't throw Michael Keane on. Do you not think he could have spoken up there? It all happened quite quickly. Tarkowski's gone down. It wasn't unexpected. It wasn't a sub that we'd been planning. So it was something of a knee-jerk reaction. But assistant managers don't just sit there doing nothing. He could have said something, could he?
Yeah, you do need someone being vocal in that position, don't you? Because you've got Nathan Patterson there, who was the obvious choice to come on at right back.
Yeah, you've been getting some game time, Patterson, hadn't he? He'd started the game, certainly recently. So yeah,
so he's been brought in and then taken out the team again, seemingly not because of injury, because he's on the bench. So that one did sort of really, really confuse me. And you kind of think, well, what's his position now? Are we looking at we're going to get rid of him and then going after that's another position we need to fill?
Exactly.
It just seems like there's sort of holes all over the pitch there. That was the one that baffled me, though. Why Patterson didn't come on, because he's a young player up against Daku, a fast player. It's not like you're putting Ashley Young or Seamus Coleman there. Although I think Ashley Young probably could have coped for about 15 minutes.
He's much more tactically astute. He'd have taken a booking, and that's fine because Keane got a booking too. But he'd have, he's a smart pro. He's an old pro, and he would have been my second choice. Patterson first, and Young second choice.
It was interesting, actually.
Michael Keane would have been 8th choice or something.
Yeah, and maybe a striker, and that's about it.
Could have brought
No,
João
what's interesting as
Virginia
well
on
is that
instead of
the
Michael Keane.
fullbacks did swap when Daku came on. So O'Brien went over to the left for about 5 minutes, and Mikalenko over to the right. So clearly, they were sort of troubled by Daku coming on, obviously with his pace, and it just caused chaos, really. And it was unfortunate, actually. The first goal, just from like Mikalenko's one lapse of concentration during the whole game, because that ball was telegraphed. You could see exactly where he was going to play. I think the player even pointed. That was a shame, because I thought he had a good game as well there. But just on the wider problems then, which is basically scoring goals. Chimiti was left out of the squad for selection reasons. Moyes said, I had the numbers where it didn't work. So I think he's basically saying, well, we had Beto, we had Rodger, and I didn't want to put any more strikers in the squad. I think that's what I'm reading from that. But we've drawn 14 matches now this season. That's more than anyone. We've won 8. That's the fewest outside of the bottom 3. I think West Ham have won 9. And no side has failed to score in more Premier League games than Everton this season, 14, level with Leicester. So it's clear where the issues are. I think the Brozovic experiment now was gone, because we've seen it for 2 games and he's not done anything. I think Saturday was woeful. He just didn't move across, so he's not an option. I think we've had the best that we're going to see out of him in that little purple patch. I think he's going to be a streaky striker at best. So for me, it sort of makes sense to just throw Chimiti in. He genuinely couldn't have done any less. In fact, he probably did more not even being on the pitch than Brozovic did at the weekend, because he couldn't have done any less. Strikers have always been a little bit of an enigma with Moyes, haven't they? It's never been his sort of strong suit. We've always kind of struggled up front, I think. Obviously, we've had great players there. Like we had Daku, we've had Andy Johnson there, was really good. But it's always sort of ended quickly, and there's been a lot of chopping and changing with strikers. Dave, do you think that's still a blind spot for him? Or because I can't understand not having Chimiti on the bench when we've got such issues up front.
Yeah, when I seen and heard that, I thought, is this an old-fashioned Moyes where he's had a bit of a fallout with someone, left them back at Finch Farm, and then thought, do you know what? I'll just tell them that something's quite clearly happened, because that's not a valid excuse, is it, to say that there was a tactical reason why he wasn't in the side in the squad, given the fact that we're not actually blessed with multiple goal scorers are. He goes with Brozier. Only reason, like I said a little bit earlier, you give him a go and see if there's anything there that perhaps will save you a few quid by getting him back on loan. We've seen nothing of the sort, have we? Let's be honest. I think he probably falls into the category of one of the worst loans that we've had. Although, I think it'd be harsh to put him towards the top, given that I think it's probably a decent debate we'll have to some of the worst loans that we've got. One of our best mates actually plays 30 odd games a season. He plays on one of the wings, doesn't he? But the less said the better for this one, because I thought he was actually half decent. It was harder for him at the weekend. But I mean, it's quite clearly that Moyes, where I do like Moyes, and I do find it quite funny, is he seems to make his decisions quite quickly. Which is ironic, because he's called Dylan and Dave, but that's more towards getting players in than it is to getting rid of them and not wanting the ones that he's worked amongst. And this seems to be the case. I mean, I know he's been on a couple of minutes every now and then, hasn't he, since he's been fit again? But doesn't look like he's somebody who's going to be competing for that single upfront role that we have. I'd like to have seen something a little bit different if we are going into these last few games, sort of trying to have some experiments of various things, which indicates we have. But by the way in which he's changed things up, by the way in which he starts a Brozovic in there, why not try a 2 of them there? Why not try playing a 10 behind a Beto or a Brozovic? Why not put Chimiti in? I mean, I think he had an easy win if there wasn't an issue to just simply say he wasn't fit. That's when nobody looks either way, do they? Just think, all right, and just nod on, and you don't even think twice about it. But the fact he said it was a tactical thing not to make one of the 9 players on the bench when we still have 2 goalkeepers is a bizarre one. And look, the indication points towards he's not for me. And it's I don't know whether, the other side, maybe I'm looking a little bit too deep into this, but is that not to also indicate to everybody that we desperately need to go and get another striker, at least one? Because then you're showing to the world, aren't you, that, well, this is the reason why we're not scoring goals. 14 occasions we haven't scored goals, so all we've got is this sack of shite up front and Beto with a purple patch. If that's all we've got, then we're turning to the owners and saying, listen, get the checkbook out as soon as you possibly can, as soon as that window opens. Because I think we say it every season that Everton need to add a considerable amount of forward players, so we're not in either change the manager again or another relegation fight. This has been the most comfortable season we've had in several years now. Yet we've won less games than everyone else, haven't we? We've only won 8 games all season.
The stats are crazy. The stats are
drawn
crazy.
Specialists, aren't we? That's not gonna stick about, that league. You will get caught at some point. And look, Moyes and Everton draws are quite common, aren't they? When he was with us in the first place, getting the draw, particularly when them games we play Liverpool always seem to be a draw. Whenever we go away from home, a draw is a decent result away from home. It used to be, and it probably still is for a club like us at the moment. But you are treading a fine line if you keep doing that sort of thing. Aside from the fact you've had 3 promoted sides who've probably been the 3 most woeful, which has been some going, given how poor the 3 last season were. It won't stay that way. I know looks like Burnley coming back up. They're likely to be shite. Leeds can turn up and do a job. And like I said the other week, I think Leeds are a Premier League side anyway, so I could see them staying up. So I think next season will be a little bit more difficult if you're looking over your shoulder. So yeah, these things need to be addressed. So I suppose on the plus side there, if Moyes doesn't fancy the lad, don't put him in the squad. Fair play to him.
Yeah, it's a worry for me though, Rodger, about the summer, really, because teams, other clubs are going to know Everton are desperate for a striker, which automatically bumps an extra 10, 15, 20% on the price. But we just can't get by with what we've got, can we? It might be another loan from somewhere, but then that comes with its own risks. I don't think Calvert Lewin's worth another contract, even though financially wise, it would probably be the sensible thing to do. But I just don't think he's good enough. Where are you on that?
Yeah, it's also disappointing. There's absolutely nothing in the academy. I mean, who plays up front for the under-21s? You're not telling me that they couldn't, show a little bit more enthusiasm and a little bit of ability that could challenge a Brozovic. I don't know. The stats are ridiculous. Let's be honest. This is almost like the same as last season. This is Groundhog Day. We have scored only 34 goals. That's the 4th fewest, right? Only the bottom 3 have scored fewer than us. And yet we've only conceded 40 goals, and only Arsenal and Liverpool have conceded fewer. So we've got arguably the 3rd best defence in the Premier League and the 4th worst attack. Now, we've only won 8 games, and that's the 4th worst record for losses, right? But, in terms of draws, 14 draws, it's crackers. And those draws have to turn into wins, because whilst we've lost 11 games, Newcastle United are 3rd in the league, and they've lost 10 games. They've lost 10 games. They've lost 10 games, and they're 3rd in the league. Man City have lost 9 games. Chelsea have lost 8 games. Forest have lost 9 games. Villa have lost 8 games, right? But they've hardly drawn. Newcastle have won 18 games. That's how you do it. Draws are almost useless unless you are desperate to avoid relegation. 3 points for a win transformed football back in the day, and we've seemingly, we're back in this, or points away from home. So goal scoring is a problem. We don't need a striker. We need 3 of them, don't we? I don't think anybody at the club's good enough. I'd get shot at a lot of them up front. And the support players, wingers we need. Ndiaye, where is Ndiaye's best position? Tell me, for God's sake, where is his best position? Is it wide? Is it 10? Where does he fit in? Because I think he's the key as to, is he going to be a Cahill type figure that Moyes is going to use in that way, so we can work with a single striker, or does he see him as one of a pair? Where does he see him? Because I don't see an attacking style of play with this squad, and therefore we need personnel to come in. Goal scorers, maybe a championship striker, maybe another loan, but we need more than one. And we need them. Okay, we say it every year, but we need them early. We don't need them on the 30th of August because they've got to fit in.
Just you mentioned Calvert-Lewin there. And look, we don't know. We'd only be sort of stabbing in the dark to know how much money we've got to spend across the summer. I don't think it's going to be, a war chest to go with things with, is it? But Calvert-Lewin, I think the topic of main discussion we've had there over scoring goals. I don't know what position we're in terms of being able to go out, and Rodger's absolutely right. You need to get multiple strikers there, at least 2. To go out and get them, because I think you basically go into the summer thinking we haven't got any. Go in with that attitude, we haven't got any striker whatsoever. So therefore, I'm looking at Calvert-Lewin and thinking, well, do you look at somebody who can redeem themselves? They can sort of put their career back in the right direction when he's still in his mid 20s, mid to late 20s. Should still be reaching the peak of his career. A player that's had a lot of injuries, a player that's been under half a dozen managers, probably even more than that if you've got the time to count them in. Do I have sympathy towards him? Yeah, various elements of that. I think attitude-wise, I think we've all had issues with him, haven't we? We've all had problems with him. We've all thought he's going to go. I think it's really easy and cliche to say that you've got somebody whose contract's coming towards the end, so he's not going to give a shit with the remaining games he's got left. It would have been interesting to see what he would be like in the remaining games of the season. Would he be sort of working his bollocks off to try and get a contract in? No idea what's going on behind closed doors, whether he will be linked somewhere else. I mean, I'd think, and I'm edging towards try and get him a new contract, given the situation we're in. And I'm only saying that just because we're not privy to the financial side of things to go and get players this summer. If it's the case that we've got to go and get 2 strikers, do you sort of sign up one and give them a contract to the one that doesn't cost us any money? And look at that. I don't know if I'm going down the same road as I was with saying about Michael Keane here. I hope I'm not getting the same level of abuse.
I think you might be.
I agree. And look, and I have no surprise that probably both of you would say no. Get rid of him now.
The thing is, though, Dave, sorry, quickly, it's not based purely on like how good he is as a striker. It's genuinely getting bodies in and having an actual striker, isn't it? I mean, I know he's like been like plagued with injury problems. He's just like one of those players who's permanently injured, and that's a massive issue. But when you're looking at the club's finances and the fact that the amount we'd have to pay to replace him is a lot more than what we'd have to do to keep him on. I can't see that side of it.
Well, yeah,
but equally, other clubs can give him a big fat contract because there's no fee, right? Other clubs can offer him 80 grand a week because there's no transfer fee.
Mm-hmm. But would they want to, Rodger? That's the point here. And
I could see Leeds giving him a contract.
Yeah, I mean, I could see someone doing a silly thing like that. Leeds probably ready and waiting there and primed to do that sort of thing to get a Premier League striker on their books. Look, he had that link with Newcastle, which you think couldn't be further away right now, really, couldn't you? Because you look what they've got. We need, what I particularly think we need is an Ollie Watkins type of forward who is doable with every role that you need a striker to do. Scores some fantastic goals, brilliant first touch, he's quick, you can move in and around the front line. We need somebody as versatile as that as a striker. Look, you're not going to go and get him, are you? Because his value would be a ridiculous amount of money right now. But I think that's when you should look in faith at David Moyes to go and get a striker that is pulled from somewhere the obscure. Look, he wasn't exactly obscure, was he? At Brentford, he was really good at Brentford for Villa to go out and get him. But I think it's something that needs to be looked at right now. But if you're looking for an option, a cheap option or a cost less option, it's Calvert-Lewin and keeping him on there. But I think it's really interesting to see what does happen with him. He's going to have suitors, isn't he? Let's be honest. It's not just going to be Leeds. It's not going to be Championship clubs. I'd imagine there's possibly half a dozen sides that would take him on. If that's the case, you do it as soon as possible as well. You don't sort of linger with things like this. And I think that's the general theme that I have with Moyes right now is that he's got to get value for money here. We've got the perfect manager in place for that because he made his career based on that. He did the same thing at West Ham as well, didn't he? When he went and got Bowen in there, Souček as well. He got Souček in, didn't he?
Yeah, think
when
so.
he was at West Ham. He has a knack for that. So I hope that he's basically given. Well, the thing that's really fitting with David Moyes and us is he did really well. He did magnificently well with a fiver in his wallet, and look, hopefully we're in a bit. Well, we will be in a better position than that. So I'm relatively positive on what goes on with Moyes and getting them in, but it's got to be early as well. You've got to get them in early, because if it does go throughout the summer and we're approaching Bramley-Moore with the same level or relatively the same squad, I don't look at the squad itself as excited I am about the new stadium. I don't look at that squad and think, wow, Everton are really kicking on here. We're going to win games rather than draw them. And look to finish in the top half, where I think next season you probably finish 13th and get in Europe the way things are going.
Yeah, it feels like the same shit, different grounds, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But just to Rodger's point, then before we finish, it is more than about just the striker. I just want to touch on the subs that came on at the weekend as well. Moyes himself said it was disappointing that he didn't get more out of them. I thought McNeil looked knackered as soon as he came on. Alcarz didn't have any impact on the game at all. Is it a bit unfair to ask for a lot of these players when they're getting 14 minutes at the end of a game? I think Alcarz needs a bit more time on the game. I think Jack Harrison, as well as he did in the first half, he was out of the game in the second half, didn't really do anything. And I think, when we are in this position where we're saying we can sort of experiment with things, I think Moyes needs to make subs sooner than just 76 minutes. Like, oh, here we go, last 15, let's see what these lads can do. Especially when you have got a player like Alcarz who is, playing for a contract at this club. I know we've said he's never settled on a club. That could be an issue with him, why, he may not be the type of player that Moyes fancies, but I would like to see more of him. And if McNeil can't cope with 15 minutes, he shouldn't really be coming on then, should he? I don't know what you think, Rodger. I mean, it's a big issue, the whole forward setup, isn't it, like you said?
I think it is. I think the depth, and it's we've got two decent centre backs in O'Brien and Tarkovsky, O'Brien and Branthwaite, and a good keeper and a perfectly serviceable left back, and maybe a serviceable right back in Patterson. But maybe we're going to lose Branthwaite. Everything else going forward is up for debate. Idrissa, get a new contract, fantastic. He'll play centre midfield, 30 odd games. That's fantastic. But everything else is up in the air. I don't think he fancies Alcarz. And I know what you're saying, we, the fans, would like to see him more. But Moyes has seen him on the training ground. It doesn't look good for me that he doesn't fancy him. McNeil, I don't know. He's had such an in and out season. There's been stuff going on in his personal life. And he does have this. He's a sort of poor man's Chris Waddle, in that he looks knackered. And yet he can, deliver a pass through the eye of a needle. I mean, he's permanently knackered, isn't he? Dwight McNeil does not look like he's about to sprint anywhere. He's just brought the shopping up the stairs and he's knackered. So I don't know what more but what can he do? And he's also tiny, so he's not really going to affect the game in when we're scrambling to get a late goal. Clearly he did at Brentford. It was 0-0 and he got a winner and he played that beautiful pass. But when you're behind like we were against City, he's not going to come on and really grab the game. I know he got the footing against Brentford, but that was a winner. We were 0-0. We had nothing to lose. We're losing to City, and he's not a player that's going to turn it around when you're behind. I don't know what one expects. Alcaraz very disappointing. Irabunum was disappointing. So all of a sudden we've got, and how many players are out of contracts and loans? Is it like 15 now if you add them up?
I think it's
13, it's a massive number. What are TFG going to do? How much money are they going to have to spend? And what you've got to bear in mind with the Freaking Group is, if they're going to put all this money behind the bar at Goodison for the Southampton game, how's that going to affect transfer budgets? If they're going to put a couple of million behind the bar so everyone can stay in till 8 o'clock and have a few bevies, is that going to affect the transfer budget? Don't know. But at least we've got the £12 back from the man who nicked the chicken meal deal, and that's been put back in the transfer pot.
How's PSR going to negotiate there with all the money we're going to pay on Ale on the last day at Goodison? Just on that point you made there about Alcaraz there, I'm starting to feel. I think we mentioned it a couple of times in passing that I'm not too sure that Moyes is completely sold on getting him in there. I think we are. I think we are. I think you'll get a lot of listeners here. I'd say more of them than not would say that he looks like a really good player that we should be signing for that amount of money, given the fact that in general terms that's a bit of a bargain these days, isn't it? To go and get 15, 18 million quid for somebody who has an attacking talent like this lad. But I think it's very easy to see a player like that who looks much better than than what the end product is, if you get what I mean. Like when he gets
an Argentinian midfielder. Everyone wants an Argentinian midfielder who's got a bit about him and is going to get stuck in. Maybe a couple of red cards and a couple of brilliant free kicks in the season. He's the player we want, but I don't think he is actually the player we think he is.
Yeah, it goes back to it, and I think I've gone the longest I've ever gone without going with the old Matt Jones quote, and that is, "There's a reason why players end up at Everton," and he fits that to me. Obviously, we've got a manager there who does he's able to polish the some dodgy rocks, isn't he? He's able to do that sort of thing. But I tell you what, I think in the context of the way we are and what we might well be financially, Moyes is probably looking at this and thinking, that's my budget there. That's the number I've been given on my latest emails. Do I put I would consider it'd be a considerable amount of the percentage of money that he's got able to spend this summer. Am I going to put it on Charlie Alcarz? Maybe it's something you look at and get another loan in from him, a second season. I would think that's the way that he go. It seems the most sensible thing to do if you're able to do that, if you haven't had enough games to see or make a decision on him. Yeah. But that's another player there. I think to the general theme of the last few minutes we've spoken about in terms of the attacking lack of prowess that we have. He right now is, let's face it, he's up there in the top 3 or 4, isn't he? If he stays in the top 3 or 4, then I still think, no disrespect to him, even though it sounds like that we still have issues if he's in our top 3 or 4 attacking players.
But the biggest issue we've got is that Beto is probably our number 1 attacking player. 6 months ago, he would be struggling to get a kick in a comedian's 11. So, he's had his purple patch, and there he is.
Why is he falling off a cliff?
Yeah,
this is what I mean about Brozier getting a game. As Moyes just turned to him saying, "Listen, you've had 5 or 6 games. Listen, mate, go on your holidays. I've had enough of you."
Yeah, I think the big one will come in the next game against Chelsea. Well, obviously, Brozier can't start, can he, against Chelsea? So he'll be out. So I imagine it will be Beto. But yeah, I think I could see why Moyes started Brozier, just to say, like you said before, let's see what he's like. Do we want him another season? Do we want to sign him a contract? I think that's flown out the window now. It is just to finish though. It is getting a little bit worrying for me now, seeing where this squad has kind of done all it can this season now, stayed up quite comfortably. But there's so many holes in there and so many gaps that will need plugging in the summer. It's like, have we got the money to do that? And I do worry about what players will be kept on purely just to keep bodies in the side.
We've got no sales, Les. That's the problem with so many contracts we've got to renew.
Yeah.
Who have we got to sell on? And all fingers.
Branthwaite.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
And Pickford.
There's no money coming in for anyone else. So it will be Branthwaite again. Very, very worrying.
And look, I hate the thought of it, but you think about Everton's PR team are going to look at the fact that the likes of when Lescott left, the likes of when Stones left. We couldn't help but try and spin it as best they possibly can, in saying that, well, basically we couldn't turn down that amount of money because we're still in that situation. Let's face it, without new owners or not, we're still in a position that Everton couldn't turn down 60, 70, 80 million quid, whatever fee that everybody wants to pluck from the air. And you're right, Rodger, there, as soon as you mentioned his name, I was like, well, that's where you get in the value for a player that you need to go and spend the money on, unless we're able to. And then obviously convince him to stay. I mean, if you're him...
Do you mean Pickford or Branthwaite? Sorry,
Branthwaite. I don't think personally, I don't think Pickford's an issue. Because, well,
I think he wouldn't have been, but I think right now, there are 3 teams who have aspirations to do a damn sight better than they have this season. They are Chelsea, Manchester United, and Tottenham Hotspur, and they've all got shit goalkeepers, absolutely shit goalkeepers.
Cheers,
Nowhere
Rodger. I
near
didn't
good
even
enough.
thought of that.
No, yeah, I mean it is. It's quite.
Chelsea's
Great point.
goalkeepers are
That hadn't
calamitous,
even crossed my mind.
It's an eye opener. It's an eye opener there. I mean, as much as I seem to bang on like at least 10 times a season, how on earth have we still got Jordan Pickford? There will be a point when we don't have Jordan Pickford. And what Rodger just said there, with 3 staring us in the face that I've got money to go and spend. Jordan Pickford, wow! Imagine Everton without him in the last few years.
That would be 60 goals conceded this season rather than 40.
Yeah,
there you go. Imagine both of those left. Bloody hell! You know the way everyone says Everton are going to be the best stadium in the Championship. They might be saying it. Might be saying it after next season if those 2 lads go.
But if they do both go, at least there'll be plenty of goals at Bramley-Moore, just in the wrong end.
There you go. This is why we call this show Blue Monday. We'll leave it there for this week before we go down even more of a rabbit hole. But yeah, I will leave you with the thought though that if you are on the ale against Southampton, maybe just rein in a little bit so the club don't lose any money for PSR. Just want to think about for the Southampton game. Thanks to Dave.
Save your money for about 20 quid a pint that you're going to be getting at Bramley-Moore.
Yeah, easily that.
Save your money for the £80 a slab of turf that you're going to get. Isn't it 80 quid for a framed bit of turf?
Oh, don't
charging? Have you not seen it?
We're all going to be
getting emails.
Has anyone heard anything?
With the spades?
Has anybody heard anything about getting the seat? How you buy your seat?
I think the thing with the pitch though is we're all going to be on the pitch at the end anyway, so just take your own.
Yeah, there'll be a pitch invasion, so people will be taking their own spades on. Say Maz, genuinely looking for a screwdriver to get my seat. Well,
Dargan said on Mailbag he's going to be stood outside the ground on the last day, selling all sorts of hardware appliances. So
it's the time to invest in Screwfix, isn't it? Right now, do you know what I mean? But do you think? Do you seriously think? Because when it happened at Liverpool, when they rebuilt their main stand, they got rid of all their wooden seats. And they put them on the online. You had to buy your season ticket. So obviously there's going to be, since they got there, fans who've been there for 70, 80 years or whatever it is, wanting their seats that they should be given anyway, shouldn't they? By rights, they should be given it the amount of money they've invested in the football club, but it was sold for around 200 quid. You had to buy it for 200 quid. Do you think Everton will go down that route? I know you'll be different.
Absolutely. I think they will. I mean, I think there's a real change here. And I think that, I'm not liking some of the things. I've banged on for years about Everton being more commercial. But I think there's a time and a place for it. And I think 80 quid for a slab of Goodison turf is taking the piss. I think they have to be careful, particularly over and above if the football's shit and the football is not going to get much better. I think you have to be careful with this fan base because their loyalty is unquestioned, but their pockets are not bottomless. And I think they have to be very careful, which is why I'm not joking. If I were them, I would be saying it's free drinks in the ground for an hour at the end of after the game from 2 till 3. Free drinks coming out. Come and party like it's 1878 or whatever.
There's the PR team right there.
That's the one. And I think that's the podcast title now as well. Party like it's 1878. Right, lads, cheers for that. Go and enjoy the rest of your bank holiday Monday. Thanks for everyone for listening. We've got all the usual stuff coming up this week. So you know what to expect. It's all here on the Blue Room leading up to Chelsea away at the weekend. Up the toffees.